Imagine standing at the edge of the known world, where the ocean wasn't just water, it was fear. A place where maps ended in blank space and legends whispered of sea monsters, endless storms, and a drop-off into nothingness. Now imagine a man staring into that terrifying horizon and saying, "I'm going anyway." Not because he was certain, but because he was obsessed. This is the story of how Christopher Columbus, driven by ambition, faith, greed, and mystery, set into motion one of the most world-changing voyages in human history. A journey that would connect continents, collide civilizations, and transform the world forever. Christopher Columbus was not the first person to imagine lands across the Atlantic. In fact, long before his voyage, the Norse explorer Leif Erikson had already reached parts of North America around the year 1000. But Columbus didn't know that. His mission wasn't to discover America the way we think of it today. His goal was to reach Asia, specifically the riches of India and China, by sailing west. And in the late 1400s, this idea wasn't just daring, it was nearly insane. Columbus was born in 1451 in Genoa, a bustling port city in what is now Italy. Genoa was a trading powerhouse, and the ocean was part of everyday life. Columbus grew up among ships and sailors, learning the rhythms of the sea, the language of merchants, and the art of navigation. As a young man, he sailed across the Mediterranean and beyond, gaining experience and developing an unshakable belief: the earth was round, and it could be crossed by sailing west. This belief was not new. Educated Europeans already knew the earth was round, but Columbus had something extra. He believed the world was much smaller than it really was. This miscalculation is crucial. Columbus underestimated the size of the earth by thousands of miles. He believed Asia could be reached quickly, just across the Atlantic. And that belief was the foundation of his plan. If he could reach Asia faster than anyone else, he could unlock trade routes, find gold, spices, silk, and unimaginable wealth. And in the 1400s, the desire for wealth wasn't just personal, it was political power. Europe was fiercely competitive. Spain and Portugal were racing to dominate exploration and trade. Portugal had already been exploring the African coastline and developing sea routes toward Asia. Spain, recently united under King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, wanted its own advantage. But the problem was Columbus had no money, no ships, and no official support. He was a dreamer with a dangerous idea, and he spent years trying to convince kings and queens across Europe to fund him. He approached Portugal first, but they rejected him. Then he went to Spain, and for years he waited. Scholars debated his plan. Some believed it might work, others said the distance was too great. Columbus refused to accept no. He lived in poverty, pushed his arguments again and again, and promised the Spanish crown something enormous: a new trade route to Asia and access to untold riches. He also demanded high rewards, titles, wealth, and the power of a governor over any lands he discovered. That was bold, almost arrogant. But Columbus believed destiny was on his side. Finally, in 1492, the moment arrived. Spain had just completed the Reconquista, the long war to expel Muslim rule from the Iberian Peninsula. Ferdinand and Isabella were victorious, and their kingdom was hungry for expansion. They agreed to fund Columbus. It wasn't just an economic decision, it was religious and political too. They wanted influence, wealth, and a chance to spread Christianity to new lands. And Columbus, filled with faith and ambition, was ready. On August 3, 1492, Christopher Columbus set sail from the port of Palos, Spain, with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. These were not giant majestic ships like many imagine. Columbus commanded the expedition, and his crew consisted of sailors who were both excited and terrified. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know if they would come back. But they went anyway. The journey across the Atlantic was long, tense, and psychologically brutal. Day after day, only ocean. No land. No certainty. As weeks passed, fear grew among the crew. They began to whisper about turning back. Some believed Columbus had lost his mind. Others suspected he was leading them to death. Columbus had to keep control, and he did it through confidence, manipulation, and hope. He reportedly kept 2 versions of the ship's log, one with the true distance traveled, and a shorter one to show the crew, so they wouldn't panic. Every day he had to be a leader, a persuader, and sometimes a liar. But there were signs: birds flying in the distance, floating branches, changes in the watercolor. The crew's emotions swung wildly between excitement and despair. Then, on the night of October 11th, 1492, something happened. A sailor aboard the Pinta saw a flicker of light, like a torch moving in the distance. Columbus himself recorded seeing it. The next morning, on October 12th, land appeared on the horizon. That moment, after 70 days at sea, was explosive. Sailors cried. They shouted. Some fell to their knees in prayer. The fear vanished and was replaced by awe and relief. Columbus stepped onto the shore carrying the flag of Spain. He believed he had reached the outskirts of Asia, perhaps islands near India. That's why he called the people he met Indians. But he wasn't in Asia. He had reached an island in the Bahamas, which he named San Salvador. The indigenous people living there were the Taino. Columbus described them as peaceful, curious, and generous. They came with gifts, offering food and hospitality. To them, these strange men arriving in giant wooden ships must have seemed like spirits or visitors from another world. But to Columbus, they represented opportunity. Columbus wrote about the Taino in his journal and noted how easily they could be converted to Christianity. But he also made a chilling observation: they would make good servants. Even in the first moments of contact, the seeds of colonization and exploitation were present. Columbus was not just exploring, he was claiming. He continued to explore the region, moving from island to island. He reached Cuba and Hispaniola, present-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic. He was convinced Cuba might be part of mainland Asia. The landscapes were breathtaking: lush forests, warm waters, and unfamiliar animals. Columbus was amazed, but he was also disappointed. He expected gold and spice markets like those described in Asia. Instead, he found small villages and societies that did not match the riches of his imagination. Still, he was determined. Then disaster struck. On Christmas Day, 1492, the Santa Maria ran aground on a reef near Hispaniola and was destroyed. Columbus had no choice but to leave behind some of his crew. He established a small settlement called La Navidad, built from the remains of the ship. It became the first European outpost in the Americas, though it would not last. In January 1493, Columbus sailed back to Spain with the Nina and the Pinta. His return was dramatic. He carried exotic plants, strange birds, and captured Taino people. He brought stories of a new world. When he arrived, Ferdinand and Isabella treated him as a hero. Spain exploded with excitement. Columbus had done what others dared not attempt. He crossed the Atlantic and returned alive. But here's the twist: Columbus didn't realize what he had truly found. He believed until his death that he had reached Asia. Yet his voyage opened the doorway to a completely new hemisphere for European powers. That's why Columbus is often remembered as the man who discovered America. Even though indigenous civilizations had been living there for thousands of years, and Norse explorers had arrived centuries earlier, what Columbus did was initiate sustained European contact, and that changed history forever. Columbus made 3 more voyages to the Americas over the next decade. He explored more islands, parts of Central America, and even the northern coast of South America. But his reputation began to collapse. The settlements he helped establish were chaotic. His governance was harsh. Conflicts broke out. Many indigenous people were forced into labor, and diseases carried by Europeans spread rapidly, devastating native populations. This is where the story becomes complex and painful. Columbus was an explorer, yes, but he was also part of a system that led to colonization, slavery, and suffering. His arrival marked the beginning of massive change, a transformation that brought new trade, new knowledge, and global connection, but also violence, exploitation, and destruction of cultures. The so-called Age of Discovery was not a simple tale of heroism. It was a collision of worlds. Still, Columbus's voyage in 1492 remains one of the most important events in history. It sparked the Columbian Exchange, an enormous transfer of plants, animals, goods, and ideas between the Old World and the New World. Foods like potatoes, tomatoes, and corn would eventually reshape diets across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Meanwhile, horses, cattle, and wheat were introduced to the Americas, transforming life there. The global economy began to emerge, and the world became interconnected like never before. But the human cost was devastating. Millions of indigenous people died from disease and forced labor. Entire civilizations were uprooted. This is the part that history books sometimes soften, but it cannot be ignored. Columbus's voyage opened the door not only to discovery, but also to conquest. So how should we remember Columbus? As a hero? A villain? A visionary? A flawed man of his time? Perhaps the real answer is that Columbus represents the power of human ambition, how one person's relentless drive can reshape the fate of the planet. He dared to sail into the unknown and succeeded. But what followed his success was not just progress, it was tragedy and transformation. Today, the legacy of Christopher Columbus remains debated. Some celebrate him for his navigation and courage. Others criticize him for the suffering that followed. And maybe both views are necessary to understand the full truth. History isn't always comfortable. It doesn't exist to make us proud. It exists to teach us what happened, why it happened, and what it means. But one fact remains undeniable. In 1492, when those ships crossed the Atlantic, the world changed forever. Two worlds that had been separate for thousands of years collided. And the ripple effects still shape our lives today, from language and culture to borders and identity. So next time someone says, Columbus discovered America, remember the deeper story. Remember the fear of the unknown, the desperation of Europe for power and trade, the bravery and stubbornness of one man, the lives of the indigenous people who were already there, the moment of first contact, the birth of a new era, one filled with wonder, adventure, tragedy, and change. Because the discovery of America wasn't just a journey across an ocean. It was the beginning of a new world.